Hello again. This time what we're going to do is we are going to be retelling a story. And when we retell a story, what that means is we're just telling the most important things that happen in that story. And we're telling them in what we call chronological order. What we mean by chronological, which is kind of a big word, but all it simply means is in the order in which it happens. So basically a retelling is just the biggest ideas of what happens in that story in the order in which it happens. So what we're going to do is we're going to be taking a look at our retelling graph. You should have this piece of paper in front of you as well. And we're going to go through the different parts of it together. Now, the book that we're going to be using for this retelling graph is the story that you should probably be familiar with, the story of Little Red Riding Hood. So I want you to think about that fairy tale, Little Red Riding Hood, what happens in that story, and we're going to start off with the characters in that story. So think, who are the characters in Little Red Riding Hood? Well, obviously, we can figure out the main character. That's right, Little Red Riding Hood. Then we have the big bad wolf, of course, Grandma, and the woodsman. Remember, the woodsman comes at the very end of the story. So here are all my list of characters. Now I'm going to think about the setting. The setting of the story, if you will recall, is the where and the when of the story. So where it takes place and when. Is it taking place during a particular time of day or night? Okay, so let's think about the setting of Little Red Riding Hood. It takes place in a couple of different places. So we could say the setting would be the forest. It also takes place at Grandma's house, and it happens during the day, the daytime. So we could say that that would be our setting. What is the problem of the story? Now, we know that every story has a problem. So in this story, what would you consider to be the biggest problem? Well, I said the wolf wants to eat Little Red Riding Hood. And let's face it, if you have a wolf that wants to eat you, you've got a big problem, don't you? Okay, so there's our problem, a big problem in the story. Down here at the bottom of your chart, you'll see that we have first, then, next, last. We're going to put the events of the story in order. And these are only the most important, the biggest events in the story. So what happens first? Okay, we'll think back to the story. What happens first? We've got Little Red Riding Hood, and the wolf meets Little Red Riding Hood in the woods. We could say that happens first off in the story. He meets her in the woods. Then what happens? Okay. The wolf goes to Grandma's house, swallows Grandma, and waits for Little Red Riding Hood. Okay. What happens next? We could say, okay, what happens next? The wolf pretends to be Grandma, and he's waiting for Little Red Riding Hood. What happens last? How's the problem solved? How does the story end? Well, the woodsman comes and saves Little Red Riding Hood and Grandma and kills the wolf. So all of these things are going to come together to make my retelling. Now it's your turn. Go ahead and read your story and fill out your chart. What can you find out? Happy reading!